everyone, and welcome to the Spark Festival session on Regional Innovation Reimagined. Hey, Adam, can you hear me?
I can. It's great to be with you,
Great.
Eleanor. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So, for everyone joining us here today, this session's all about basically the fact that we're seeing a renaissance of regional innovation and startups, particularly in the post-pandemic world, with people rethinking where and how they want to live. And we recently had the Binary Shift Regional Innovation Conference, which was all about regional innovation and startups. So I'm the co-founder of that conference. I'm also CEO of GippsTech, which builds startup and tech communities in regional areas, particularly in Gippsland and Victoria. And Adam was one of our keynote speakers from Illuminate Education. I'll pass it over to Adam to introduce himself in a moment, but just before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we're all dialing in from today, which is the Gunai-Kurnai people in my case in country Victoria, and I'm sure will be different for a lot of you here on the call today. So over to you, Adam, to introduce yourself and say a bit about what's your relation to regional innovation.
Yeah, so excellent. And look, it's great to be here for this discussion and sharing about what's happening in our regional communities with everybody across Australia. So as mentioned, my name is Adam Morstogel. I'm the founder and inspirer at Illuminate Education, an organisation that teaches young people in skills, entrepreneurial skills. We talk about young people being confident, creative and capable. And we've got a real priority to get out into regional and remote communities and share that and deliver that, because we recognise that actually our regional communities are that bit more creative. There's that innovative spark that's in there with the resources and the access to equipment that our regional communities have. So really focus on that. I'm also an entrepreneurship facilitator and a director of the Van Diemen project that helps start businesses across Launceston and northeast Tasmania. Very, very proud to be based in northern Tasmania. So very much regional, and then obviously we have to fly overseas to get anywhere else in the country as well, as much as Bass Strait doesn't require a passport, but you know what, these travel boundaries that we have at the moment probably feel like we do. But yeah, as a bit of a background as well, like I'm also a finalist for Young Australian of the Year in 2015 for supporting regional innovation on the West Coast, and a range of other things, and listed in the top 30 entrepreneurs under the age of 30, and actually was the only person that year outside of Victoria and New South Wales to be listed, which is something for me. It's always great to see how we can get more regional innovators and entrepreneurs out there on that world stage, and even an Australian stage. So very proud about regional innovation. The Van Diemen project, we help start businesses. We run a co-working space. We're heavily engaged in our innovation communities. But I've also learned from around the world and try and bring that in, not just to support northern Tasmania. As much as I am passionate about this region, Eleanor, we regularly chat, and I regularly chat with other people as well and share those skills and understandings with other regional innovative communities.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And just for everyone else on the call today, we'd like this to be a very interactive session. So it's we've got a few questions, but we don't have prepared slides. So any questions from the audience, please feel free to chime in. We'd love to hear from you. And also, just to kick things off, we'd love to see where everybody else is dialing in from. So if you're watching this today, please type in the chat and let us know where you're dialing in from, like town and state. We'd love to hear where the audience is from today. So a bit more about what we do at GippsTech as well, and a bit about the Binary Shift conference, which is kind of what kicked this off. So we do a lot of quite similar kinds of programs to Adam with Illuminate Education and the Van Diemen project. We deliver startup programs here in Gippsland in country Victoria. So we run the Startup Gippsland program across 6 local government areas. We're also the local entrepreneurship facilitator, so we catch up with Adam pretty regularly about that, sharing ideas and comparing notes. And we particularly focus on startup and innovation communities, so more on like business education rather than education for young people, but very similar kinds of topics around entrepreneurship and innovation. So also very much connected with a lot of the other regional innovators across Victoria and Australia-wide. So that's how the Binary Shift Conference kind of came about, bringing together innovation and entrepreneurship communities and helping to connect people in regional areas. Because one thing that we observed here in Gippsland is a lot of the time people building startups in the region, as well as trying to support innovation locally, we're often networking more with people in Melbourne compared to people in their own hometown or the next town over. So the idea behind events like Binary Shift and a lot of the other activities that we run is about connecting people locally so that they can come to get to know their own local startup and innovation community, and encourage others to follow in their footsteps, because you can't be what you can't see. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about encouraging regional founders, regional entrepreneurs, regional innovators to be very open about where they live and to speak within their local communities about what they do. So, Adam, like, what is regional innovation from your perspective? Like, how would you define it? How do regional startups and regional innovators differ from city innovators? And are there any myths around regional innovators, innovation and regional startups that you'd like to break down for the audience?
There's so much in that. Myths, first of all, I sit there and I go, what is the difference between regional innovation and innovation in a city? And I actually don't see that there's a difference. I really don't. I think innovation occurs everywhere. Potentially in our regional communities, we're more tight-knit, so we've got a stronger connection. We've got strong connection with customers. I know, like, living in Launceston, our state premier in Tasmania is from Launceston, and I've run into him down the street. That's what happens in regional communities that I don't think happens the same way in cities. And so I think that's really powerful. But I think it's just a different dynamic. We are still seeing businesses start. I live in Launceston, and normally 50% of my education workload is in Melbourne, and that's fine because I get to live in a place that I love to live. And maybe that's part of the shift, is that regional innovators are people who choose to live where they live, and their businesses can be based anywhere. But again, no matter where you are in Australia, your customers can be anywhere in Australia. So I don't think there's a big difference. I think that there's just the opportunities and the benefits of being in regional communities. So I think that sort of the myth of, well, wait, you can't do a tech startup in a regional area. Well, I'd love to argue with you about that, because I live in Launceston's one of the largest regional cities in Australia to have fibre to the premises NBN. So of course, if you want that high-speed internet connection, regional Australia is a place to be. 5G is rolling out. Regional Australia is a place to be. I think all those myths of, you couldn't ever do that business in a regional community, I think every single one of those we could definitely throw out, because you can do any type of business in our regional communities. In terms of regional startups, again, I think there's this like sort of thought process again, regional, rural, must be ag tech. Well, no, there's more than that. We do. Like, we're very proud of our food and our produce here in our region. We do some fantastic things in that way. And so, yes, we do definitely take that with pride, but that's just part of our regional advantages. And so we use those, but every region has its advantages. Every community has a reason for doing business in a different way and bringing those assets to the table. So basically, I think, that idea that, well, regional is different to a city, let's blow that one out of the water. That doesn't exist. It's a community of people who are passionate and want to get things done. Potentially, I think we have an advantage, though, that because we are regional, we connect with other communities really simply. We know our community is the size that it is, and we know that we want to connect with people from other places because we don't have all of the right, sort of the full set of resources and assets and skills in our communities, but we're so proud and happy to tap into other conversations like the ones that we have all the time. And obviously with people that are here on the chat as well, definitely are probably having, if not, are going to be having after this discussion as well. And I think that's what works really well for regional communities. And there's so many advantages. What about you? I don't know, have I covered it all, or is there any other myth that you want to blow out of the water?
That one about regional must be ag tech, I get that all the time whenever I go to Melbourne events and talk about working on regional innovation. Like, the comment I get straight away is, oh, do you work with farmers? Is it all about ag tech? So that's one that I end up having to address all the time at face-to-face events for people who don't really know much about regional innovation. But yeah, I agree with you about all of those comments, that it's basically the same as in the city. Like, you find the same diversity of industries, the same diversity of types of businesses. But yeah, one thing that actually surprises a lot of people in the city compared to like the kind of misconceptions of regional areas as being less tech savvy is how much more willing people are to connect across a distance and to use technology to connect across a distance, because of exactly what you said, that people live in small communities. There's less local role models and local connections for them to make. And so they do end up connecting across a wide distance, often into Melbourne, but also across other regional areas, or even far beyond Melbourne. Sometimes it might actually be something for city people to learn from in terms of making connections outside their own backyard. A few other thoughts that I had around aspects that differ for regional areas. tyranny of distance obviously is one. Like, there is a disadvantage to the fact that it takes us 2 hours to get to a city event from here in Gippsland, and would take you even longer to get to a Melbourne event with having to get on a plane. So there is a bit of that disadvantage around making connections, but that means you just have to change the way that you approach connections. So you have to be willing to go online instead of going to a face-to-face event. And I think that's been one of the really great things actually with events shifting online right now, that everyone else is in the same boat. So we're actually on an even playing field at the moment. It's not a disadvantage having to dial into an event. Another thing that actually that you mentioned was small communities. And so that means that on the one hand, the community is very friendly and welcoming, and you get to know people and you get to know your potential customers. On the other hand, like, one possible downside of that is it might make people a bit more hesitant around making mistakes, because mistakes are a lot more public. Whereas in the city, you can be kind of anonymous in a sea of random startups. Here it would be like your next door neighbour and your mum's friend who would be finding out about your bad first draft and like your embarrassing MVP. So that might be a thing that, in some cases makes people a bit hesitant about getting out there. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think on the other side of it, though, like, I think of, and I'll talk about these sort of stories, like, I used to play footy for the Queenstown Crows when I lived down there, and so you'd talk about what's going on around the footy club. And people would go, let's get on board and help. And they're actually behind you and backing you because of a personal relationship as well. So as much as, like we always talk about, and I'm sure that you do the same thing, about getting those first customers. Look, if those first customers are people that are connected to you and do say that first draft needs a bit of extra work, they're still behind you because they want to support great new business ideas. Like, regional communities come together like nothing else. I've lived in places where the mayor has said to people who have like come in and want to start a new business, and they're meeting with the mayor and they're doing all that stuff, and the mayor's just gone, look, you can meet with me, but you probably want to meet with Adam because he's going to give you some other connections, and just go and do that instead. And I think that sort of willingness of supporting and getting behind things as well. Yeah, you're right. Yes, those are going to be your first customers. That can be bad, but I think also I'd rather have a group of friends or people that I'm connected with who back great ideas and back things from my regional community and are proud of that. They're the people I want behind me because they're going to give me the great feedback as well to get my idea going.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. And I think one of the things that ties into is it's important to educate the entire community about how innovation works, so that everybody has realistic expectations about what those bad first drafts will be like, so that they don't expect them to be fully polished. They realise this is kind of a beta test. This is trying something new, and like be honest with their feedback, but also like understand that it is just the first step on a journey. So it is going to improve over time. So I think it's not just about like the kind of education work that we do for startups and entrepreneurs. It's not just for the startups and entrepreneurs. It's also for the entire community around them, to make sure that the community understands how entrepreneurship works. So are there any kinds of trends that you've been seeing in regional startups as opposed to city startups? There's one that stands out to me actually, which is that I always had a perception based on my work in Melbourne versus my work here in Gippsland. There's a lot more social enterprises here in Gippsland. There's a lot of people who are in it to solve a real world social problem that they see around them, not just to make money. And it was something that I didn't have any hard stats on, but quite recently I saw some data from CENVIC, the Victorian Social Enterprise Network, that said 50% of social enterprises in Victoria are actually located in regional areas, whereas regional areas only have 25% of Victoria's population. So that's actually a higher percentage of social enterprises. On the other hand, there's a lower percentage of tech startups. So LaunchVic stats on locations of tech startups show that only 3% are located in regional areas compared to the 25% population. So that's a few trends that, do you see the same kind of pattern repeated in Tassie?
You explained the social enterprise one, and I can definitely see how that comes through as local people look at ways to solve local issues. I know it's an area of work that I'm really passionate about, and I've done an international trip to the US before studying social enterprise as well. So my eyes are probably a bit more open to that space than most, and I'm actually partnering with the City of Launceston on how we can actually start more social enterprises in our city and provide some great support, because we are seeing that need is there. So definitely that is coming through. I think one of the big things for us is we just see, like, you get the tech space. I understand all of that, but we've got lots of people who are looking to create their own jobs. That's ultimately what a lot of Yeah, we don't see that as startups. We've got people who have been saving their COVID supplements on their job seekers and going, I don't want to go back on a payment. I want to start a business. Here's my passion. And I think that makes it a lot more accessible in regional communities. One or two people working for themselves is a great business idea. 95% of businesses in Tasmania have less than five employees in them. So we are mainly a small business economy anyways. But I think with that, that starts to perpetuate that idea of working for yourself, maybe having one other person is actually a decent sized business and you're doing well in that way. And so I think that's one of the things that might get missed is that you go into sort of that tech space or those other large startup spaces. It's all about getting that scale and getting the amount of people and that sort of stuff. But the ones that we see all the time are people who are backing themselves, investing in themselves, and putting that forward. And I definitely see that time and time again. And that's something we've got to get behind and celebrate. It's not about like, yes, we can go, oh, how much investment did you get? Like, what are your funding rounds, everything else? But it's also, how much have you put in? What does it matter from that perspective? And that's something that's really exciting. And they're business ideas that you just sit there and go, like, that's a really great business that you're passionate about. Let's go do it. And those are the sorts of things that I love to see coming through time and time again. And there's a real appetite right now. I'm talking to people who are going like, oh, I want to start a cafe or a restaurant. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, admittedly, we are a little bit more open than it is in Victoria. But on the other side of it, people are going, if I can start a business now in these times where it is a little bit of a downturn, my business is going to work. And that's a really optimistic sign. And people are backing them and getting behind them because they're like, we are regularly putting stories in the newspaper and our local newspaper is celebrating businesses that are starting. That is what happens in regional communities. We all get behind them. We all want to see them succeed. And I think that's always really exciting. I've gone off track there, but I'm just excited.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I think there's a lot of innovation that we're seeing coming out right now because when times are challenging, that is actually when a lot of innovation happens because you have to innovate to survive. You have to innovate when the world is changing rapidly. That's when there's actually opportunities for innovative ideas to really grow and flourish and take off. So I think there's a lot of people right now who are both kind of reevaluating where they are in their careers and what they want to do with their lives, as well as the environment is actually really good for starting new businesses. Even though it might feel like doom and gloom, which it has been hard for existing businesses, but this is actually a great time to be starting something new because this is when, if you're starting completely from scratch, you can design a business that really works in this environment and that can really grow and take off and flourish and end up creating new jobs both for yourself and for a few other people around you. Yeah. So one topic that I know you're really passionate about, Adam, is why regional? Why are regional areas the best places to start your business, and especially now? Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
I can see a countdown timer on the screen. I'm worried that I might use all of it. But no, for me, one of the things I absolutely love about regional areas is because we often think, and potentially from merging into the city, that we understand there's a critical mass there of businesses that are doing things. But the challenge I will always set is that you have to live and work. You have to live and work. And so to be able to find that balance, I love the fact that regional Australia is definitely the place to do it. You did mention how long it takes to get to Melbourne. I'm sorry, actually, it takes me less time. When there are flights, it's a 45-minute flight from Launceston to Melbourne. I know I am on a plane after someone is leaving their home to get to a breakfast meeting in Melbourne that I'm going to join because that is so much quicker. And that's what regional communities allows. It allows that disconnection, allows the space. I live 6 k's away from my workspace. I run regularly. We've got great spaces around us. We've got a city that is it's just a really exciting city to live in, Launceston. And so with that, that's what regional communities have. It gives you the space to disconnect, to switch off, to be creative, to actually work through things, to get out in nature, everything like that. That's exactly like it gives you the mindset to be able to thrive when you are working. So regional Australia definitely has that. And we need that pace to actually be innovative and creative. If we're always rushing and always trying to make that next deal and doing that sort of stuff, it is really taxing and really tiring. And so regional communities allows us the lifestyle that we want. And so that we can use that and recognize that we probably spend more time living than we do working. As much as the startup probably feels the opposite, we do need that chill out time and that sort of stuff. So that for me is one of the big things. Regional areas across Australia are becoming more and more connected. So internet connections and phone connections and everything else is really powerful, but then also airports, train lines, everything else. It's not hard to get from a regional community into a city and to be able to make a trip of that. When I lived in Queenstown, it was a 4-hour drive, but I'd drive that 4 hours, I'd make a whole day's worth of meetings, and I'd drive back, and then I can chill out and spend the rest of my week taking it easy. So there's ways to balance that really effectively. As talked about, the first customers are probably in your community. You can chat to them. People will have a go and back you for that. And so I think regional communities are really, really great for that. But also, like, I think when we start to think about where we actually want to live, it's all about, we've actually got to think more than regional areas as being a place to attract people to start businesses, but it's a place that our families want to live. We want to grow up. We want to do all sorts of things. So it's about healthcare. It's about schools. It's about the places that we live and building that as well. And I think that's where regional Australia has not done as much, is that we haven't solved the livability aspect. We've kind of gone, how do we build like innovation ecosystems, and how do we do all that stuff? How do we replicate what's in a city and bring it into a regional community? When we didn't move to the regional community because we wanted a city-based tech startup hub, we moved to a regional community because we wanted to live, we wanted to connect, we wanted to celebrate, we wanted to do the things that we can do in those communities. And then we know that we can plug into networks and we can bring those conversations across as well. And so that for me is why regional areas are definitely fantastic to start businesses. And then I guess as a final point with that, I think it's also there's the opportunity and the space to do things and to make things happen. So Launceston's a place where at the age of 18, a lot of our school leavers do go. We've got the same problem as most of regional Australia probably. And they go and then they come back when they're about 30. But often it's one person coming back for a job and the other person's come back with their partner. And they're not leaving them for the move. They're going to take it on. And so they'll create something and they'll start something. And so in that way, that's again why regional communities work really well, because if you've got that sort of that revenue stream that's coming in for your family, well, then you've got the space to play and you can take it slow and you can work through things in your community as well. And again, that's why I think regional communities are definitely such a great place to start businesses. What about you, Elena? What's in Gippsland that really stands out? I probably sold Launceston really well to our whole audience. You can come down when the borders open, guys.
Yeah. It's pretty similar in Gippsland as well. Like that really resonates with my own personal story, that I grew up in Tassie, and then at age 18, pretty much every person in my friendship group in high school left and all moved to different places interstate. So I ended up in Melbourne, and my husband happens to be from Gippsland. So we've been coming to Gippsland for about 15 years now. So just traveling here regularly to visit family. And my husband's been working here for over 10 years now. So for me, it's always been a place that like I like this kind of lifestyle, and I love the scenery and the natural beauty of the area. It's actually very similar to Tassie in that sense. Like the landscape is quite similar. I've always loved traveling here for visits, but I never really thought that I could actually make a career here. Like coming from the tech world, I've worked at Google, worked in tech startups, and basically I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to find a job that lets me do what I love in a small country town. But after Rob spent 10 years commuting to Gippsland and spending 3 hours on the train every day, and after I spent 3.5 years commuting to Sydney to work at Google and spending something like 6 hours a day on planes and in airports, I decided after leaving Google that actually maybe it's time to see if there's something that can be done around this idea of technology and innovation for regional areas. So a lot of the same kind of lifestyle issues were really what attracted me, that I wanted a 5-minute commute to work. I wanted to live in a place with no traffic noise. So like my requirements moving here were a big garden and no traffic. So that I got exactly that. And being able to just like go for a run these days and run past cows and flocks of cockatoos and the diversity of landscapes, even just within a 10K run, and having a 5-minute drive with no traffic lights and beautiful views on my way to work every day. So just things like that, like the amount of time you get back compared to sitting in traffic or sitting on public transport for 2 hours a day. So it means actually you can both build a business and have a life and enjoy your life. So I think that's something that with the like kind of increased focus on mental health and work-life balance that we're seeing with people reevaluating how they live at the moment, I think that's going to be attractive to a lot more founders and business owners who are thinking about the way they want to live their life, not just the business they want to create. So I think we'll probably see a lot more people making that kind of decision to start their businesses or to base their careers in a regional area. Both in terms of knowing that there are enough companies out there that allow flexible remote work these days, and in terms of knowing that, like, actually those barriers for regional businesses are being broken down, so you can actually be successful in your career and be based in a small country town. So it's very similar kinds of things that attracted me in terms of why to start my business here. What about some of the downsides? Like, are there things that, like, you talked about a few of them, like livability and making sure there's enough access to healthcare, good schools. Anything else that you'd say is like kind of downsides for living in a regional area? Because I know we've been very positive in general so far.
I don't know if there's too many downsides. No, I think one of the challenges, obviously, COVID brings it out, is that distance is very hard to conquer at times. If your market is in different places, then it is sometimes a little bit difficult to get to them. Sometimes we're teaching into Perth, and that's a fair hike to get from Tasmania to Perth. But saying that's something that you just kind of, some of those things are compromises that you do make for those decisions. And I think when you are, as a business owner, thinking more than just you and yourself, but you're actually thinking about your family, there are sometimes the compromises that we are very willing to make. I think sometimes some of the downsides is like some regional communities. I think this is part of the education piece that we've definitely got to do. Is we've actually got to be okay with businesses that don't have customers locally. It's kind of we create business networks often that's like about how do I network but create customers in the space. Like, I don't want customers. I don't need, you're not my customer group. My customers happen to be in another state or another city, and I'm okay with that. I just want to contribute and help out and be part of things. And we've got to be more aware of that. And I think regional communities, because we think of the scale that we've got and we know that we have to go beyond the town to be able, or beyond the city to be able to create that scale, we're already thinking in that way. But we've also got to help those, I guess, pillars of our business communities to think like that. And then also, as part of that, think of how do we create launching pads for businesses out of our regions. Knowing that, for example, a councillor or a local government that gets behind our startup ecosystem, they're not just going to create a business that does great things in their local area. It's probably going to start something that goes into other places, and that's a really, really good thing. Been working on a project recently that we've started to design it, we've scaled it, and we've started and scoped it out, and we're starting to go, this is bigger than this region. And it's often a conversation that people will go, let's not take it there. But no, the organisation we're working with has gone, no, let's actually, it has to go there. It has to be bigger than that. And they're okay to kind of give up on that. It's not just ours anymore. It goes out there. It's going to do big things. But I don't think all of our regional communities are there just yet. And maybe the last thing as well is that, and this is a bit of a personal story from my perspective, or something I've been heavily invested in. So we've got to fight for the communications and the technology for our regional communities. We haven't done that well enough. So yeah, when I was in Queenstown, I basically moved into Queenstown. My wife got a job at the Catholic school down there, and we moved in as the mine closed. Mount Lyell mine, there were 3 deaths in 6 weeks. It was a really unfortunate situation. I've ever only known a closed mine down there. And so it was really interesting because one of the things that came through not long after that was the NBN that was going to be rolled out was no longer rolled out because of a budget cut. And we fought really hard, and we had to teach the whole community what the internet actually meant and what NBN actually meant. And satellite NBN is not sufficient to run a business on. And so that sort of conversation has to happen. We need to talk more about those sorts of things. Otherwise, it's just like, well, I've got my mobile phone. Can I just hotspot? Is that good enough? And it's like, no, we need better than that. We need to be able to do things like this on quality connections. And so maybe part of what we need to work on in our regional communities is to really celebrate what we can bring in and actually fight for it. As far as I know, the West Coast in Tasmania is probably the only region that campaigned hard enough to actually get the cable rolled back in, and that rollout to continue. I know a lot of regional communities around Tasmania that I spoke to they felt like they gave up too early because they actually thought that they couldn't win against that rollout, but we managed to get that across the line. And I think, but there's an education piece that goes with that. So we need to get everybody to be part of that and actually fight for the cutting edge resources. In a city, you're probably going to get it because there's enough customers, but in your regional communities, you should fight for those things because they are going to be the things that will make or break your community. And we're talking about future-proofing our regional towns, and we need those assets in our communities to really fight and to thrive. And it probably goes to airports as well. As airlines start to open up again and we start to travel again, fight for the routes to connect you to the major cities. there is actually a really strong advocacy piece for our communities to fight for what they want in their future. And we can't just sit there and go, well, hey, 90% of the businesses just work with people in the town. Well, great. Well, if there's no one moving to the town, your business is going to dry up. So we need to really fight for those things and be proud of what we've got. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, and it goes for a lot of the other things that you've mentioned, like say road infrastructure, hospitals, good schools, good local amenities, just things like even planning decisions in councils taking into account livability, not only like numbers and like basic population statistics. So I think, all of that, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I think I know we've talked about it as well. One of the great things for Binary Shift is to share case studies and examples. And on that point, and I know it was a question I was asked in my session as I helped close the event, was around what is happening in this space. And one of those things, we're really lucky in Northern Tasmania to have Northern Tasmania Development Corporation that works across all of our 8 councils in our local areas to prioritise projects of regional significance. Yes, like Tasmania has 27 local governments for 550,000 people. I'll just leave that stat with you guys there. We have as many as the city of Geelong has in one region. But anyways, so with that, we've got to collectively work together, because you could imagine each local government fighting hard for each thing. But then as we start to look at a regional approach, we start to go, what are the signature projects across our regions? And I feel like that's one of the things that regional communities can start to do better and look collectively, rather than how do I have every single main town in each council area replicate the same things, and realise that we can push and pull, and there's different advantages of different locations, and we should be really proud of that. But we've actually got to work across projects of regional significance. So let's get a hospital of regional significance in an area, not realising that we don't think we need 8 the same. That's really massive. We need one really good one, and look at how do we work collaboratively in that way. And that's definitely something that we should be advocating for, and actually be proud to be part of and go, you know what? Regionally, that is the right place to be for that, and we're okay with that because it's still in our local area and we can help with that. Or here's a region that actually needs it more than we do. Make sure they get it first. And regional communities, I think, are really good at advocating for that, but we've just got to find those bodies to do that more.
Yeah. I might just pause for a second and take a look at a few of the questions and comments in the chat. We've got a few comments. Casey's saying that, yes, you can create a better work-life balance in a regional area. That's why I moved back to regional Victoria a couple of years back. And Marie and Chris saying, as business founders, we really need to learn to ask for help, the help we want, and how we'd like that help, and who we'd love them to connect us with. Yeah, absolutely. Like connections, it's so important to not just be trying to make cold connections, but actually use our existing network and particularly since we can't do that serendipitous running into people at events that the Melbourne folks would have opportunities to do. We need to really lean on our existing network and make the most of those warm connections as much as possible. Another comment from Anne-Marie. Local people may actually be surprised by what you're doing and have a new venture, and most are happy to positively support and promote you and your business. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I see in a lot of regional areas is, just like Adam said, people may not be aware of the businesses that are in their local area when their customers are outside the area. So that's why I think it's so important for startups that sell nationally or globally to still talk about themselves within their local business community and make connections within that local business community. Because that's the thing that lets councillors, other business people realise what opportunities there are in their local area, as well as it encourages all of those local business people to provide more support for businesses that may be selling beyond the region. And those businesses are still really important for the region's economy because it's bringing in revenue into the region. It's creating local jobs by bringing in that income from outside the region. So, absolutely, they need to be make sure to be visible. And when they are, then I think I totally agree that I think people are very, very supportive and very proud of their local success stories.
I think one of the things that I always talk about is we look at the back page of a newspaper and we see all the sports stars and the sports stats, but we don't do a very good job at celebrating businesses. We do sometimes have local business awards that we do that with, but we've got to do that on a regular basis because I think those success stories are there. We know them. We're connected to those stories, but we don't actually shout about them from the rooftops. And I think we definitely have to do a better job in that across all parts of business. I don't just think it's a regional Australia problem. I think it's a problem nationally that we need to work on. But we've got to work out, how are we giving out gold medals every week for businesses that are doing awesome things? If someone can come up with a great idea for it, let's do it. That doesn't cost a lot of money and take a lot of time, but let's find a way to do it, because we need those champion regional Australia businesses to be heard and to be recognised and celebrated by their own towns and places.
Yeah. We've got a question from Omar in the chat. Shouldn't COVID-19 facilitate a renewed urgency to decentralise innovation as well as make online meetings the norm, which overcomes the tyranny of distance? Yes, absolutely, Omar. And that brings us to another question that we've kind of had as a topic, which is like, how has COVID changed the opportunities available to regional startups and innovators? Like particularly around breaking down that tyranny of distance. So I've got a story around that, but Adam, just wanted to pass to you if there's anything you wanted to comment on about that question.
Yeah, no, look, I'm completely with you that COVID has completely changed the way that we see distance and regional locations. And admittedly, I do a lot of work with people in Melbourne, as I've mentioned, and so I'm calling people in their homes. And so no matter where they are, I'm still seeing a home on a screen. I don't have to leave where I'm working right now. And that has connected and brought the world closer together. But I think our world was already close together. I've been involved in international forums last year. I had the opportunity of going to the World Economic Forum headquarters in Geneva. I also helped co-facilitate the world's largest innovation process for the Sustainable Development Goals in China. And I've got friends across the world that I'm regularly calling and chatting to on WhatsApp all the time. That's the world that we live in, but for some reason we always thought that when we want to meet with an Australian, we've got to go and visit them and meet them face to face and have a coffee with them and have a chat to them. And I'm sorry, but that's never had to be that way. If you're going to call someone across the other side of the world, I got a friend of mine when the Beirut blast went off. I checked in with my friend in Lebanon, and we did a project from here that supported and raised some money and supported that. Like, the only way you can talk to them is via video call. So I feel like we've embraced a technology that was already at our fingertips. But I think one of the great opportunities, and you're watching it right now, is the events and the resources that are available no matter where we are. This probably would have been something we would have all had to be in a central location to deliver, but we don't. And it means we can bring other people into the conversation, which is really great. 2 weeks ago, I was watching the Sustainable Development Impact Summit out of Paris as part of the World Economic Forum. The week before that, I was invited into an event on the edge of the United Nations General Assembly. I could watch all of those from Launceston in Tasmania, and that has changed the resources that we have access to. By right, we should have always had them. And so I think that's a really important point to state. So I really do think that has completely transformed that, and we've actually adopted those things more than we probably ever have. But I think COVID has changed the way that we do think around innovation and locations that we can be based, because if we can work from home, if a business doesn't need to have 1,000 people in an office in a CBD, well, will all 1,000 of those people want to keep living in that city? That's the big question that we have. And businesses and organisations need to embrace the fact that your skills and your knowledge actually in a regional community are actually worth even more. I know, like it's not related to this, but I think the skill sets and the examples probably fit. The Bendigo Bank in Queenstown as a community fundraised bank and all that sort of stuff. Their staff are often the treasurers on most of the community groups, because while they might not give the funds, and they do in some areas, but outside of that, they also recognise they have knowledge. And they share that on a regular basis. And I know I sat on the school association and things like that. Like, that's the sort of stuff that we should be doing. And I think there's actually a real asset that businesses and organisations can give to communities, no matter where they are, to actually be able to use the resources and the experiences that they have in their organisations and actually contribute to communities all across Australia. And I think post-COVID, when people do start to decentralise, we actually start to see some really great opportunities coming from that. And I don't think it's just a matter of picking up an entire organisation and putting them in a different city. I know that's probably been a Victorian strategy. It's about how do we create these worker hubs that actually can be anywhere. And then co-working spaces. Like, I know we're both in that space. I'm in my co-working space right now, and there's a range of organisations that are just sitting outside that room that are all work for different people. Some of them have staff in other parts of the country, and that is okay, because they want to be based here in Launceston and their staff want to be based in other places. We've got to embrace that and celebrate that. And actually work out how businesses can encourage that more, because that will actually spark innovation in our regional communities even further.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with your point there that, like, basically those opportunities to bridge that tyranny of distance should always have been available, but this has in some ways been the trigger for making them available. So I think in some ways, regional people have always been kind of willing to embrace those remote connection opportunities, just that in a lot of cases they weren't even available as an option. Like events like this would have been usually offered purely in a face-to-face format, and the only way to connect would have been just to watch recordings afterwards, without any way to dial in and ask questions, let alone actually present as a speaker at one of these events. For us, I know this is actually much easier for me to be able to speak at events because I don't have to travel to Sydney and spend an entire day just traveling to speak at an event like this. So I think it's actually opening up a lot of opportunities for regional people, which I completely agree with you, should always have been there. But now, because everybody else is in the same situation where they can't meet physically and they can't travel, suddenly these opportunities are becoming available. So I think in a lot of cases, it's more about the mindset shift of people who never had these barriers, that now suddenly experiencing these barriers forces them to make these kinds of accommodations available, and forces them to rethink the way that they do business. Like one story that I had in relation to this was I was on a call with a bunch of startup investors last week, and multiple people said that over the past 6 months, they made their first ever virtual investment where they invested in a startup where they'd never met the founders face-to-face. Previously, they'd never been willing to do that because they felt that face-to-face personal connection was really necessary for them as an investor to be able to make sound investment decisions. Now they're realizing actually virtual investment is possible, and they'll continue doing that in the future because they were really missing out on a lot of startups that they just wouldn't have invested in the past because of not being able to make that physical connection. So that's just one way in which opportunities for regional businesses are opening up now. And it's all about the misconceptions of people who didn't have those disadvantages, like finally changing and like that mindset and behaviour change that actually creates opportunities for regional businesses where they might have previously been excluded just by virtue of being regional. So yes, we do think that COVID-19 is going to accelerate this decentralization process and create a lot more opportunities for regional businesses. A couple of other comments, and this one, so we've got about just under 10 minutes left, so might go towards the last couple of questions that we had on the list. And this question from Catherine really ties in really well with one of our final questions. So Catherine asks, which regional innovation networks across regions would you recommend connecting with? And other clusters or hubs that share great insights and emerging models. And that ties into our last two closing questions. So what initiatives are we seeing across Australia and how others can get involved? But also for each of us in our own communities, what can we do on an individual level to support innovation within our community, regardless of our postcode or the size of our town? So, Adam, did you want to? I know you've got lots of thoughts about this. Did you want to?
I know. I haven't got enough time. Let's do this. Look, regional innovation networks. Look, I'd be looking at tapping into every single one that you can. Silicon Beach, we still do some events from out of here. Have a look around your own locations. Obviously, what Startup Gippsland's doing, what we're doing, the Van Diemen Project, your own startup ecosystem, Startup Tas, Startup Vic, and connecting with all of those and just start to get a feel for what's happening, but also find who you connect with and who you're part of. And business chambers are not a bad thing to be part of as well. You might feel like you aren't ready for that sort of thing as a startup, but trust me, you will be, because you'll find a lot of great resources in those spaces as well. But I think also just start to reach out and connect as events are online. Like I know at the Van Diemen Project have been talking to Space Cubed in Perth about running events, let alone the 3-hour time zone. That means that an evening event is going to be like almost midnight at our time. That doesn't matter, because if the resources are fantastic, great, let's be part of it. And so I think that's one of the opportunities, is that we don't just look at what's available in our own town and what can we drive to. We are actually looking at how do we reach out into other ecosystems and other spaces that are doing really, really cool things, and then starting to learn from what they're doing. That's really great. I think that's definitely something that we can get involved in and be part of. But connect with those that you also work with and are partnering with. What are they tapping into? What are they finding really valuable as well, so that you can collaborate? I spend a lot of time in the education space, so I feel like a lot of mine are in that space as well. Or else it's then at the higher level economic development agencies and looking at what they're doing. In terms of what we can do, well, I think just first of all, just take ownership of what you can create and start in your own local area. If you have an office that's a little bit bigger than what you need, rent out one of the desks and get a friend in your space and create some sort of collaborative space if there's not a co-working space available, and start to build those communities, but also start to look at how you can share what you create. I'm also the founding curator of the Launceston Global Shapers Hub, which is the youth movement of the World Economic Forum. And with that, we're always running events all the time. We ran one a couple of weeks ago about a millennial-friendly city, which is a really interesting space to get people together to think about our city. We're collaborating on one about a seasonal worker program soon. Like, just get involved in what's happening. And if you can lead something, reach out, share, collaborate with others. Don't try and own it and build your own empire. But actually collaborate and add value and bring other people in to that, so that no matter what size you are, like even if it's 5 people sitting around a bar having a drink about something and you're talking about this and that's the starting point, that's where it starts, and that's really great. We might feel quite depressed in a city if only 5 people turn up to an event, but in a regional community where people are looking to gather and doing things, great. That's the starting point. And those, we're so connected, we can collaborate and build out. But I think it's own what you can, create events. I know from our perspective at the Van Diemen Project, one of the things for us is these great events that we've been watching and be part of. So, for example, Spark Festival is broadcast in our back room. And so we've been telling people just to come in and say hello and come and have a chat and come in and watch what's happening as well. So look at what you can do to be invitational and invite people in and be part of that space. I could go on for the rest of the time, Ellen, but I know that you've got some things to say as well. So I'll hand back.
Yeah, one other thing I'd say is even if your customers aren't local, and even if you're running a purely online business, do make that effort to connect with your local community, because you'll be inspiring others to do similar things. You'll be the role model for others, and you'll be the person helping others feel like they're not alone when they're in that kind of when they're looking to start a similar kind of business. I'd also really recommend connect with your local council economic development team.
Mm-hmm.
So they're often really interested in hearing from local businesses, and those online businesses tend to be the ones that are a bit less visible in the community. And so they often kind of fly under the radar, and the local councils may not be aware of what businesses like that exist in their area, or what councils can do to support them. But those businesses are actually really important employers. They're really important contributors to the local community. And it's really important to make sure that councils are aware of the needs of those businesses as well. So I'd encourage you, particularly if you are running that kind of online business and connecting more with people online than in your local area, do try and make that effort to make connections within your local business communities and within your local council, because that's the kind of thing that actually helps other people to see new emerging business models and to see new ways of doing business. And it helps inspire others to look at the internet and e-commerce and technology as an opportunity, not just a threat or something that may be a bit outside their understanding of how to do business. So the other thing that I'd say is there's a lot of things that can be done around on an individual level around creating communities and creating networks. So just like you said, Adam, that you can start really small. You can start with just having 5 people sitting around a pub, around in a pub and having drinks and chatting about business ideas. And I think that professional networks and entrepreneurship networks are really crucial to making sure that people have that supportive community around them. Like in Melbourne, we kind of take for granted that there'd be a million different meetups and business and professional networking events. But particularly for people who are new to a regional area, one of the challenges might be, how do you make friends in the professional entrepreneurship space? Like for me, coming from having lived in Melbourne for a long time and then moving out to a small country town, one of the challenges for me starting out was, how do I make friends locally when I don't have kids, don't go to church, and don't play football? So that's kind of one of the reasons why I got very involved in a lot of the business communities, particularly early on, to get to know other business people and other professionals in the area. So, for example, some things that you could do just as very basic things to start on your own might be start a young professionals networking group. If you employ people who may have moved to the area, put together a welcome pack that tells them about all of the social events across a wide range of different kinds of activities. So if they don't have friends locally, they can find ways to meet people. Just find ways to welcome newcomers to your town and make them feel connected and introduce them to your networks, so that they're not trying to make friends entirely on their own with people who may have been friends since high school. So a lot of different things you can do to make people feel welcome and create those professional and entrepreneurship communities. I totally agree, connect with communities across other regions as well. I know Startup Gippsland has a lot of events online at the moment, just as everywhere else in Victoria. A lot of the entrepreneurship facilitators share their events. And then there's bigger events like Spark or the Binary Shift Conference, which you can use to meet lots of people at once. So, comment from Rahul, connected with the Sydney Hardware Incubator. There's heaps of things out there, and the city events as well are right now really accepting of virtual members and virtual connections. So we're coming to the end of our session today. Thank you all for joining. It was really great to chat about regional communities and regional startups and entrepreneurship. And thanks so much, Adam.
No, thank you. Thanks for everyone for tuning in and fight on for regional Australia.
Yep, awesome.